When I received an offer to become a manager at a small lodge in the wilderness of Minnesota, I didn't think much of it. The lodge was deep in the woods, far from residential areas, and almost completely cut off from the outside world. A peaceful and quiet place where people come to relax and escape the hustle and bustle of city life. But I didn't know that this place held much darker secrets. From the first day I arrived, I felt something was wrong. Not because of the scenery or the job, but because of the strange rules I had to follow. These rules were not only unreasonable, but they also made me feel like there was some invisible force watching me. One of the first rules that gave me the chills was not to look in the mirror after 11 p.m. The lodge had many mirrors hanging everywhere, but after 11 p.m., they had to be covered. One night, out of curiosity, I secretly removed the cloth covering the mirror in the guest room. At first, I didn't see anything unusual, but as soon as the dim light from the lamp fell on the glass, I saw a reflection from my perspective. A dark figure with no face. It was standing right behind me. I was told not to leave my room after midnight, no matter what noises I heard. During the first few nights, I heard strange sounds outside the window, light footsteps, children's giggles, and even whispers of unknown origin. One night, unable to contain my curiosity, I opened the window and looked out. In the moonlight, I saw vague shapes, like human figures standing silently in the middle of the forest, their eyes looking straight into my room. Another rule involved a painting hanging in a long hallway where few people passed by. The painting depicted a family posing for a photo in front of the lodge, but something was off. The eyes of each person in the painting seemed to be watching me as I walked by. Late one night, I stopped in front of the painting and realized the number of people in the painting had increased. There was a fifth figure, vaguely visible, in the corner, as if just entering. Hearing those rules, I couldn't help but shiver. They were rules so strange that they couldn't be explained. I wanted to ask why, but my instinct told me to keep quiet. The first night at the resort, I couldn't sleep. Everything was eerily quiet. The wind outside seemed to whisper distant warnings in my ears. Around midnight, I heard light footsteps outside my room door. At first I thought it was a guest or a staff member, but then I remembered. This resort had no guests this season, and the only person I saw besides me was the manager. The footsteps continued to echo in the dark hallway. I didn't dare step outside, just holding my breath and listening. Then another sound stunned me. A small, childlike voice rang out right outside the door. "Did you see me?" My heart was pounding. I didn't know what to do, so I just tried to close my eyes and ignore it as instructed. But the voice continued, getting closer and closer. "Can you see me?" I remembered one of the rules the manager had given me: ignore all noises, and I decided not to open the door, not to look. But my fear grew. Were the noises just in my mind, or was there something really standing outside the door, waiting for me to make a mistake? That night passed in fear, and I couldn't sleep another minute. When dawn came, I hurried out of my room to look for the manager, but he was gone. I didn't know what to do next, but one thing I knew for sure was that I had to be more careful. These rules weren't just jokes. This resort seemed to be hiding a dark secret that I couldn't imagine. Gradually, the strange signs became more evident. Every night, I could feel an invisible presence. The whistling wind outside the window sometimes turned into an unpleasant whisper, as if someone was standing outside. Sometimes I heard creaking on the wooden floor in the hallway, even though no one was around. The hallway lights would suddenly flicker, go out, and come back on. Then one night, the scariest thing happened. It was during my night shift, sitting in my office reviewing my notes. Suddenly, I felt a sharp drop in temperature. An unusually cold wind blew through the closed window. All the lights in the office flickered, then went out, leaving me in complete darkness. My heart pounded as I heard slow footsteps echoing in the hallway. I quickly stood up and walked toward the door. No matter how hard I listened, I couldn't make out who the footsteps belonged to. Perhaps one of the guests, but why were they moving around at this time? I opened the door and looked out into the hallway. It was empty, lit only by the dim light from the hallway lights. Not a soul in sight. I walked slowly down the hallway, holding my breath at the slightest sound. Suddenly, at the end of the hallway, I saw a shadow pass by. It was not clear, just a blurry figure, standing still in the darkness. My heart was pounding. I called out, "Who is it?" But there was no answer. The figure remained motionless, as if watching me from afar. Despite my efforts to calm myself, fear slowly spread through me. I walked toward it, but the closer I got, the darker the shadow became until it disappeared completely. By the time I got there was no sign of anyone standing there. The hallway lights flickered again, more intensely this time, as if they were about to burn out. Later, when I returned to the office, I discovered an old notebook that I had never seen before. The notebook looked like it had been there for a long time, dust gathering on its surface. The cover had a faint line, "Previous Manager's Diary." Flipping through the pages, I shivered as I read the scrawled words describing strange phenomena similar to what I was experiencing. The previous manager had written about strange rules and dark figures that haunted the night. But it was the last line that really made me shiver. "They come in the darkest night. Don't look them in the eye." As I read this, the lights in the room went out again. And this time, something stood right behind me. I didn't dare to turn back immediately. In that moment, my whole body stiffened, clearly feeling a cold breath blowing down the back of my neck, causing goosebumps to appear all over my body. My heart was pounding so hard that it felt like it was about to escape from my chest. But one thing was clear: I was no longer alone in this dark room. I closed my eyes, trying to focus on my breathing, silently hoping that what I felt was just my imagination. But then a whisper sounded right next to my ear, as light as thin smoke. "Don't turn back ... or else you will see ... I couldn't bear it any longer. I turned around, and right in front of me, standing there, was a tall black figure. Its shape was blurry, but its eyes were clear, deep, and black like an abyss. They drilled into me, as if wanting to suck my entire consciousness and soul inside. I panicked and retreated, almost falling into the table behind me. But the black figure didn't move. It just stood there, silent, looking at me. The silence in the room was more terrifying than any sound. I didn't dare take my eyes off it, but I didn't know what to do. The whole room seemed to be immersed in a stifling, heavy atmosphere. Everything felt frozen. Both time and space were strangely distorted. A moment later, the black figure suddenly disappeared as if it had never appeared, leaving me with darkness and indescribable panic. I collapsed on the chair, my whole body shaking uncontrollably. I knew clearly that I had seen something that didn't belong to this world, and worse, it was watching me. The next day, I met Jim again, the cleaner I had asked about the strange rule before. His face was even more tired and worried than usual. I couldn't stand it anymore and decided to face this. I pulled him aside to a quiet corner, whispering, "Jim, last night I saw something in the office. It's not human, and I know you've seen them." Jim wasn't surprised, nor did he hide his panic. He bowed his head, sighing before replying, "You shouldn't look them in the eye. Once they know you've seen them, they won't leave." I swallowed, trying to make sense of what Jim was saying. "What are they? Why are they here?" Jim looked up, his eyes filled with fear. "I don't know. All I know is, this isn't the first time they've appeared. Years ago, the previous managers had similar experiences. But once you see them, you can't escape." Jim's words sent a chill down my spine. I understood that the ghosts in this motel weren't just paranormal phenomena. They had intentions, and their target could be me. The next few days became unbearable. I tried to avoid the night shift, but it seemed that wherever I was, I could feel invisible eyes following me. Every night began with strange footsteps, whispers echoing through the walls, and cold gusts of wind, even though the windows were closed. One night, in a nightmare, I found myself pulled into a dark room with no windows, no way out. All around me, dark figures began to appear, forming a circle around me. One of them stepped forward and whispered, "You broke the rules." When I woke up, I found myself lying on the office floor, clutching my old diary from the night before. Scribbled words appeared on the pages, even though I had never written them. "They don't leave. They never leave." I began to panic. I couldn't stay there another second, so I decided to leave the motel. But before I left, I needed to find out what really happened here. I went back to the office to look for old documents that I had previously overlooked. And that's where I discovered a horrifying secret. Years ago, this motel had been the scene of a series of mysterious disappearances. All reports were hushed up, with no official explanation. The missing people were said to have left quietly, but the truth was that no one had ever really left. They had been swallowed up by the strange shadows that haunted the place, the strange rules that the manager is not allowed to reveal, the mysterious figures, and the increasing tension make everything in the cabin worse. The feeling of foreboding is unmistakable. One quiet night, everything seems to collapse when strange knocking sounds come from afar. The manager follows the noises, feeling as if someone is deliberately leading him deeper into the darkness. The path to the back of the campus is a place no one is allowed to go after sunset. As he continues, a faint whisper echoes from the trees, conjuring up faint images of the missing. Only when he steps through the threshold of the closed room that no one dares to open does he realize the horror that awaits him. Inside are pale faces, people who used to be the staff of the cabin, but have now turned into haunting entities. They were no longer people, but empty shells, trapped between life and death. The manager, trembling but unable to tear his eyes away from the terrifying sight, began to understand that he could not escape this place. The wooden house was not just a tourist destination, but a giant trap, a living tomb where lost souls were trapped forever. As he turned to flee, the door suddenly slammed shut behind him, and the ghosts began to move towards him. The sound of the wind howling outside mingled with the cold whispers from all sides, and the story ended in silence, leaving a mystery that would never be solved.